Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com and also 92.1, our partners over there at the radio station 92.1 WFOV. And we are just delighted to come to you on the first of the year. And I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas. And you know, we're saying Merry Christmas now. And hope you will have also, along with your Merry Christmas, a very happy New Year and get your New Year off to a good start.
I always consider Happy Holidays kind of a partial victory because holidays is a contraction or a deviation of the phrase holy days. So we're still showing that there's an influence there. Holidays.
Yeah. So. Did you hear a lot of Merry Christmas though last year, John? Did you hear mostly Happy Holidays?
Well, actually, I hear a mix. I mean, a lot of people. Really, it's really cool about here. But I live out on the east side of Flint, and that's usually most people here really are not affected by the PC crowd stuff. They're not, they might be kind of derelict, but they'll say Merry Christmas. They might be kind of derelicts, but they'll say Merry Christmas. And
I should have said not last year, which means now 2017. I meant to say 2016, the year before last, since we are now into a new year. But I did notice in 2016 and then 7 years back from there that we began to move away from Merry Christmas into, we almost intimidated from saying Merry Christmas. But you go out there during the holiday season last year, 2017, and all you would hear was Merry Christmas. I was getting so many Merry Christmases I could hardly get out these stores. Not that I was in there buying a whole lot. But there is a new mood in the country, and I hope you really enjoyed your whatever holiday you celebrate on the 25th or therein, and that you'll have one of the great New Years that you've ever had. John, we got our dinner already set up for today, and that would be cabbage, Cornish hens this time, John, rather than the chicken we had for Christmas.
I like Cornish hens too because it gives each person a chicken. I mean, I know they're. Years ago, I guess there used to be a different breed. I guess now they're just immature chickens. I don't know. Or, immature. I mean, I don't mean like they're pouting, but no. But I like a Cornish hen because you could, if somebody likes different seasonings on it, they can they'd be more individualized.
Yeah.
I like that.
We'll bake the Cornish hens and we'll have that with the cornbread and the cabbage. You told me about putting an apple in there at the end, so I'm going to try that, John. If it doesn't taste good, I'm going to bring you a plate on it. You can eat it. But we're glad that you're with us today, and we're glad that we will be on the air at 12 o'clock noon on Saturday on 92.1. They have good sound over there at the studio, by the way. And it's just a pleasure and a treat for us to be able to be a part of that network because I think 92.1 is an up-and-coming station. And I want to commend Paul Herring again for the fine job he's doing over there at the studio.
And I love the fact that he can actually operate remotely. He was in Vegas the past, out west during this Christmas season, and I don't know when he's coming back, but he could still operate that remotely because he's pretty much a solo effort person there himself, and I think he's got a real good grasp. He's got a real good thing going there. I respect that.
He's a visionary. If Paul was not doing some of the things he's doing in the city, a lot of things would not get done. He's also over the Juneteenth celebration, and wherever you see some things that are going on in the city, you see Paul Herring somewhere around it, either filming it or recording it in some other manner, or being over the program. And I give him a lot of credit because he's one of those visionaries in the community, one of those pillars. We are going to be a pillar here for the next hour. And we'll take our breaks here at 92.1. John, you're going to let me know exactly when that break should
I'll
take
start
place.
Playing 25, 50, 55 mark, you'll hear the music, and so that knows we're going to break for WFOV, and we also want the viewers to know when they're listening on the radio to come back, stay there. They'll be back after that break. So
right. That means I have to shut up at that time and then announce the break, and then also when you come back into it from 92.1, we'll announce the that you'll be returning to the broadcast. Glad to have all of you along, and as I said, hope you are having your best New Year's family reunion of all times, and that you made your resolutions again that you're going to resolve to follow during the year. I have stopped doing it myself because I found out that after the year is over, I have a lot of bumps on my tongue. John, I'm not making any more resolutions because I got hollered at you last year.
I don't try to use that as a cut out, starting point for things like launching, like the first of the year, because I basically think if something that's really needed, I'll adjust to it better than. But if I have to plot on it, to me, it just makes it more of a. When you fail, you're just going to feel like more of a failure. You're more of a failure.
Yeah. What I'm going to do this time, though, I'm not going to be making any resolutions, but I am going to talk about this article that came out today in the Washington Post, and it is a year in review. So rather than talking about resolutions that I know I'm going to break the next day, I make them on the first of the year, and then on January the 2nd, here I am pouting over the fact that I have misled myself again. So I'm not going to make a resolution this year. I'm going to be true to my calling based upon my past. So I'm going to just simply do a review of the year that we've had and try to talk about some of the winners and the losers based upon this chronology of that was in the Washington Post. And I'm certainly not endorsing the Washington Post or New York Times and other media, even the conservative media, and I go with them a lot more than I do the media such as CNN and MSNBC and NBC and these other networks. I can't trust anything that goes on there, and I take everything that goes on Fox with a grain of salt also, because we do have fake media in this country, and it's like you can't take anything they say unless you check behind them and check for yourself and know for yourself, because we just have, I don't even think it's fake media. I think it's propaganda. And when they say that fake news, it's not, well, the news is that the news is propaganda. And so it's not really news, it's propaganda, and that's the news. See, the news is not fake news. The news is that we are being fed propaganda by the news media. And nothing those jokers say can be trusted. And that's why the alternative media, I consider 92.1 to be an alternative media, and also allpointstv.com to be an alternative media. And I think that that's going to be the winning edge over the long haul as we gain more and more listeners in these alternative sites. And we're going to be putting some pressure on the mainstream, what's called MSM, the mainstream media, that really is nothing other than propaganda for the most part.
The only drawback is of the alternate media sites, myself included, is trying to monetize it. And because as soon as you start doing, taking money from advertisers, they're going to want you to relinquish a lot of what you might cover because it's going to be embarrassing to them. So, that's the reason why, like WFOV and us, it would be great if we could have people on board, send, if they want to donate to, especially WFOV. I know he's got the nonprofit status, so you can go to their website and go over there, but that's how you support it, because otherwise that's going to go by the wayside, because Paul and people like him and what we're doing it's got to be helped out.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000% there, John. When you monetize any communication, then you are paying the fiddler so you can call the tunes. And if you notice it, whenever somebody takes over in a revolutionary type of thing, when they take over the country, the first thing they want control over is the media, because you can then control what people know. In fact, they have right now what they have going on in Iran. You've heard about the Iranian uprising that's going on, and Donald Trump is taking a very different view of it than was taken when they had an uprising. I think it was in 2010, somewhere around there, during Obama's first term. And Obama kind of poured water on the parade of those persons that were having an uprising in a freedom movement, and did not really support it. So therefore, quenching it was a lot easier than it will be this time. They can the first thing that the Ayatollahs did, those Muslim mullahs did, was to shut down the external media, because they know that as long as the media has some free activity, they can in fact inform what's going on. All that would do, all information does, is fuel whatever's going on, because there's a free flow of information. So they've shut that down, and they think by shutting it down, they're going to shut down this movement. But there's been enough light, I think, thrown into it this time that they're not going to have the same outcome as they had. I think it was 2010. They won't have the same outcome this time. It seemed like the fuel has already been added to the flames this time, and I think we're going to have a different outcome. I think that protest over there is going to result in some strategic changes and some fundamental changes. You're talking about fundamental transformation. I think we're going to see it in Iran, and if Iran has a fundamental change, that's going to put pressure, John, on North Korea.
I was looking at the back when I was at high school when they first, the Iranians seized the hostages, in that lasted over 2 years, almost over 2 years, their captivity, and we're all enraged by that. But when you actually look at it, relatively speaking, the hostages were treated pretty well. They did. All of them I know got back to us. Came back to us. I'm not gonna condone the actions of seizing people who had basically nothing to do with what's going on there as hostages. I have nothing. I'm not condoning that. But I think that basically, that's where I got different from a lot of conservatives, because I think Iran's actually an example of how Western intervention is actually has worked a bit us in the butt. It really has. It really has. And I think maybe allowing people to speak out more now, which I think Trump's tact is, I think that's far more intelligent. I really do.
Yeah, I think that any changes are going to be made have to be made from within the country itself. And this uprising is because of the real life experiences of the people there, and they're rising up against the oppression of that population. And anytime you have a populist uprising, then that is something that's churned by the events inside the country. And there are some real problems inside of Iran as far as oppression is concerned. And I'll tell you what I do. I compare the uprising and the protests in Iran to these persons that are making $2.44 million on average in the NFL, that are out there kneeling when you're playing the national anthem, knowing that there are no consequences of it. They're not going to have, there's nothing they're risking by doing that, because there's a different type of setting it plays in here than it would be playing in Iran. I can tell you right now, they wouldn't be on their knees when the flag is being played in some of these totalitarian states. And really, what I like to see in 2018 is they keep talking about how fundamental the oppression is in this country. I would like to have someone that's not a millionaire to make the case. And for the reason that if the people that are saying that the oppression is real, let the ones who are oppressed make the claim, so we can look at their situation to see if their circumstance is a matter of oppression or is it a matter of preparation. See, I'm not hearing millionaires telling me about oppression is real, and when they get off the football field, they're going home to these mansions and talking about the oppression of someone else. Let the someone else that they are pointing to talk about the oppressed, and the circumstance that they have in life is based upon their oppressed circumstance where they were not given a shot because of the fundamental unfairness of the society. I don't want privileged people telling me about that. Let the ones that are not privileged make their case. And they're not doing that. See, John, you see the problem here? The problem is that we have well-heeled millionaires want to claim that there's a fundamental oppression in the country, risking nothing in it. And I think in a way underneath the surface there is a subconscious tendency going on here where they are apologizing for their own successes.
Well, it's it's like, to use a psychological term, it's a projection. They find that stuff irreprehensible in themselves, but they can't attack it themselves. They put it on somebody else and they attack that person. They create a straw man, or straw people rather. And they hate them with this vehemence. It's like, and their blistering comments and stuff are not actually the people they're aiming at, but probably themselves. But they don't want to deal with it.
It is aiming at themselves. It's a projection of an image out there they bought into, that the country is an oppressive place to live. It's certainly not Iran, is it? But it's an oppressive place to live, and yet their own lifestyle is a contradiction of that, because if it is so oppressive, then how did they in fact earn or acquire or achieve or obtain their successes? How do you explain that? So here they are up here at the very tip of the plateau of the country. They are all in that top 1%. None of them are in the bottom 50% of the people that are paying, 2% of the taxes in this country. They're in that top 1% we talk about all the time. The ones that they say are not paying their fair share of taxes. and they're up here talking about how oppressed, what, that they are? No, they can't be talking about their own experience. They're talking about how oppressed the people are down here in the bottom 50%, but they're not in that 50% themselves.
Well, it's a basic thing of Marxism, basically. If you look at the history of Marxism, coming from Karl Marx himself, they are the elites actually thinking they're assuming the role of being speaker for the oppressed. Karl Marx was not from a working class family.
That's a good point. Yeah, that in fact, Karl Marx said that if the revolution that he was talking about from the proletariat would occur, the proletariat being the working class, that if the uprising was going to take place, if the revolution was going to come into vogue, and it was going to come into some kind of fruition at the end of the process, then it would take someone out of the privileged class to bring that about. This is a Marxian term, just like you said, John.
Well, years ago, this is personal. U of M Flint. I was working there, and I was picking up some equipment. That again, that's why I saw equipment into classrooms, and there's this one noted, and she's probably, I don't know if she's still there or not, so I'm not going to name names. But anyway, she's going on, she's always ranting about the upper class, the ruling class. One day I was just picking up equipment, she was talking to a student of hers, and they were talking, and though this woman dressed, the professor, she was dressed really well. I mean, I'm not a women's fashion expert. This woman probably wore suits, probably wore $600 a piece. Because my girlfriend at the time was telling me she's got a beautiful wool jacket or something. That's like $600 here, some $700 there. So this woman dressed to the nines, okay? Anyway, she was sitting there talking to a student after class, talking about her stock portfolio. Now, this woman's a committed Marxist, vehement, flaming Marxist, talk about her stock portfolio. Now, I was like, I'm wondering if the student was a personal friend of hers, just happened to take a class or whatever, because I wonder if the student was also puzzled and bewildered by this glaring hypocrisy. But I was amazed by it. I just walked away shaking my head, you know?
Yeah, you know, if a person out there with a fishing pole and he's out there fishing, don't come telling me about the man who doesn't have any fish. Show him how to, in fact, fish. It's also what Booker T. Washington said in 1895. You know, Booker T. Washington was saying, a vessel lost at sea. There was a cry coming from a vessel at sea, and they said, water, water, we die of thirst. To which the other boat reply came from another boat saying, cast down your buckets where you are. And this distress call came up again, and water, water, we die of thirst. To which the reply again came, cast down your buckets where you are. And what Booker T. Washington was saying, and this is more than 100 and some odd years ago, and you would think people by now would have caught up with his message, is that you have to cast down your buckets where you are and make the circumstance in which you find yourself work for you, so that whatever the conditions are, you can solve it by, in fact, casting down your bucket, getting busy to resolve the problem you're talking about. Because kneeling does not get it. Doesn't solve anything. And they make people believe that they're out there with some type of demonstration that's actually substantive and designed to do anything. These people are just wasting our time. We go to a football game to see some football. You know, and if you want to do anything about the problem you're talking about, throw some money back in there, where the people you're talking about that are disadvantaged will become more advantaged by you giving them some scholarships and things like that. Otherwise, get off your knees, and when they play that anthem, show these kids how you didn't do that until you became millionaires. Now you're on your knees, but you weren't doing that when you were playing football in college.
See, I think I read Voltaire. I read Voltaire when I was a teenager, and there was I think it was a play. It was from one of his plays, and it was Candide, I believe, and it was like the advice from the advice that always have your labor, because labor keeps at bay three great evils: boredom, vice, and need. So I mean, I always looked at it as that's one of my favorite quotes of all the writers, because you got to have your labor, because it does. And the thing is, we're dismissing a huge portion of the population doesn't engage in labor, of any sort. I don't care if it's creative, if they're being well paid for it. They're just not doing anything.
Yeah, that statement kind of reminds me of one that I used to hear when I was coming up. All the old people would say, I never understood it, but they would say, an idle mind is a devil. Did you ever hear that, John? An idle mind is a devil's workshop. So they kept us busy, right, in terms of things we would do in the summertime. We weren't going to school, so they kept us involved in activities. There were people in the neighborhood that have a softball team, a baseball team. I played baseball in the Sandlot, and somehow I got enough skills in the Sandlot to get a scholarship to play baseball in college. And I paid for my last 2 years in college by playing baseball. And that's what they did, though. They kind of had that idea boredom. You have to use the time in a more wise way, so as you're getting some things done that would not be done just sitting around idling away your time. And that's what I look at they're doing in all of the. I mean, the last games they have the season, these guys, these jerks. I look at them as jerks. These jerks down there on their knees, sabotaging our future in this country, and people applauding that nonsense as if they're making a contribution. These people are hurting us. By these children out here in 5th and 6th grade haven't even had a chance to get out the blocks yet. Still have to learn their ABCs and how to go forward in society and take advantage of the opportunities that are there. And if there are not as many opportunities there that as there should be there are more there than there were there during the time of their great-grandfathers. And there's certainly more opportunities there than there was of those persons picking cotton on those plantations. And the way you pay them back is pay forward. And that's to bring the people forward from the rear that have yet to go where these football players have gone, and they're out there sabotaging on their knees. You wouldn't be on your knees in a run. I can tell you that right now.
Well, I do think it's kind of disingenuous for people who are making a career when 1 year they're going to make more than any of us will in 5 lifetimes working at the jobs we have, and they're going to talk about oppression. Okay, and they don't if they want to call attention to the abuse of cops, there should be some, because I get tired of they're us against them. The cops are us. All that might be true or might not be true, but if there is an issue, and it does seem to be a problem, there does seem to be a problem of cops killing a lot of people in this country, and it's got to be addressed. But is that the vehicle to take? I don't know. I think it's worked against them.
I'll tell you who's against us, and that's what we have not understood about what occurred in 2016. In the election that took place November the 8th, 2016, we have not gotten it yet. The person that against you and against me and against all of us are those persons that make up the political class in this country. John talking about the police. The police act only in the name of the politicians.
I agree. And then the same thing that goes down to people like the tax code. Rail against the tax code. You got politicians criticizing the rich aren't paying their fair share. And it's the same politician often who's the one who helped write the tax code. How disingenuous, how much of a corrupt individual can you be to say it's the tax code and you're part of the tax code creation? That's just bizarre that people will say, but wait a minute, you wrote it.
John, what I want to see in 2018, more than anything else, is I want to see the American people become more informed and less misdirected by this propaganda. Because what you had in 2016 that elected Donald Trump is not even about Donald Trump. It's about the fact that he wasn't endorsed by the Republican elite and he wasn't endorsed by the Democrats in the opposite party, and therefore he had to come to the American people for the wherewithal that got him right now in the White House as the 45th president of the United States. And that's a good thing, because if he could not rely upon the ones in Washington, in the Beltway, the power center, the power elite, both of them against us in both parties, because he had to come to us for the wherewithal to get elected, then we have a horse we can ride, because both parties are against you.
He is a third-party candidate. I've said that time and time again. He is the third-party candidate. Now, I got issues with the guy individually. I do. There's certain things.
So do I.
But as far as it goes, he has done everything. He was attempted to do everything he said he was going to do. That is such an oddball thing for most Americans to deal with. Because most of the times they'll make their promises, and then 3 years later, when they're wrapping up and looking for another election, all those things have disappeared, and you can't bring them up again.
I'll tell you what I'm pushing in 2018. This is a very important year. This is the year of the midterm elections, with a people that have now awakened from their slumber. Not everybody, but it will never be everybody. The ones that have awakened sufficiently in number as to put a president in office against their will. And I have to tell you something. I don't know if you caught up with this or not. On these two networks, I think you have, but I'm saying that if you haven't, what you need to have caught up on is that we have a president in the United States right now in office, been there for 1 year, that cannot claim he's there because of the two-party power centers in this country, the duopoly in this country. We have a dictatorship that doesn't look like the dictatorship, because it is a duopoly where you have two parties, both of them squeezing us from both sides, and they're squeezing us in the middle. So because there's not one party, we don't see the totalitarian aspects of it, but we are in a very monopolistic power center. And if you look at it carefully, as we go toward the November elections in this year, and this is why this is a very pivotal year for the American people, because don't stop the music. I mean, you know, we sang a song, a different song in 2016, and we are now coming up on our break, and we will have a 4-minute break by those at 92.1. See you in about 4 minutes, and when you return, we'll catch you up to speed once you come back in that period of time. We're very glad to have all of our listeners with us for that time period that you're here. We know you can do other things with your time, and we're just delighted that you would spend your time with us, because we know that you don't have to be here, and we respect your time, and we try to do some things a little bit different here at allpointstv.com and also at 92.1, because we know that your time is valuable. I'm just telling you, most of you already know, but just to reiterate the point, and you can't be repeating it too often, is that we are caught in a vice in this country by these two parties. I had a person call me the other day, and they wanted me to pledge some money to the cause that they were calling me for, and the cause was that they want to spend money on term limits. And I told them that we already have term limits. Do you think when we elect these persons into office that we are electing them into those offices for life? They come back before the voters every 2, 4, or 6 years. You got it? We have term limits. John, the terms are already limited.
We should. Well, the thing is, most people, I'm guilty of this. I don't keep track of how my congressmen and senators vote on everything. And the thing is, there is an app. I got it. You know, what's up or whatever it's called, and it tells you how it comes out as soon as they cast a vote, what they cast their vote for. So there's ways of doing it, and it is time consuming. Yeah. And you probably just basically got to prioritize what's really meaningful to you and what do you want to keep track of. But let's face it, so everybody's saying they're mad because they're meeting for this length of time, or they're breaking for so long on a vacation. I'd like to see them on permanent vacation. If the only thing they're getting together is conspiring together, okay? I really like to see that.
So you kind of applaud the government shutdown. John, let me respond to what you said there. You see, here's the other point. John made a point here, and he said that he doesn't keep up with how our elected officials are doing on various bills and so on and so forth. And I understand that, because people are busy. And plus, a lot of what goes on behind closed doors anyway. We don't follow these persons around, find out what kind of deals they're making behind our backs. So we don't keep up with that. You can't keep up with it, because a lot of the decision making goes on out of sight. And you see them putting this stuff behind closed doors up there in Washington, where they put, what was that guy's name they put behind closed doors, had him testifying, this guy named Andrew McCabe. And he wasn't even testifying about anything that had to do with anything related to national security. They put him behind closed doors because they didn't want the American people listening in on what he was testifying for. They keep things out. They don't let us know what they're doing, because they know if we knew what they were doing, then we would turn these guys out with regularity. You remember when Obama was talking about he's going to put it on C-SPAN, and when bills come up and they're deliberating on these bills in the House and Senate, we're going to sit on C-SPAN. How many times have you seen on C-SPAN, folks? How many times have you been on? You're not going to put that stuff on television. Are you kidding me? If we could hear how these persons arrive at their decisions and find out that none of what we want is what they are making, what they're considering when they vote on these bills, the lobbyists are determining that. And the lobbyists go there with a fistful of money because they know there's a money game. It's not a game of representing anybody. And I was going to respond to what John said, because that's one side of how that issue plays out. In other words, people are supposed to be looking at what their representatives are doing. And we're back now with 92.1. Glad you came back. We know you didn't have to come back, but we're glad that you did. And we're not very far away. We can't move that far away from where we were in 4 minutes anyway. And we're not very far from where we were when you left. Glad you came back, and we pick it up at this point. I want to respond to what John said. John made a point that we can't keep up with our representatives. And so therefore, not always being informed, we don't know if they are doing the job we sent them there for or not. And therefore, sometimes we go to the polls and we elect the same ones over and over again, because how would we know if they're fulfilling their responsibilities or not? Let me just respond to that and say this. Yeah, be that as it may, let's understand who politicians are. And that's really all you need to know. Politicians are parasites. But they're not just parasites, they are parasites with political influence, and the political influence comes from the fact that what they say in back of it, there's a gun. Now, it may not seem that way, that there's a gun in the room, because you don't see the gun. But if you don't comply, I tell you what you will see. You will see the gun. Let's say, for example, this year's and all the past years, you got a tax break. And they did a whole lot of beating their chests, and the Republicans were taking a bow. They better have done that, because they're going into a election year in 2018. John, this happened at the end of the year, so you can remember this during the election year 2018. But they didn't do anything. I mean, I'm glad that people got more money in their check. Do not get me wrong. Your money will kick in. You begin to see some difference in your check. The more you paid in, the more you get back. That's mathematics. I'm not surprised by that. But let's understand that they did not, in fact, politicians do not give money back. It's just like a thief. A thief does not give any money back. This is not a tax reduction. It was a tax transference.
Well, you want to illustrate this point. The tax that we have on our phones, our regular phones, our home phones, was put on rich people during the Spanish-American War to raise more revenue to support the war effort, right, during the Spanish-American War, which was a real brief one in comparison to what we're in now. But guess what? That tax is still there. Okay, so that's an example, an illustration of just one example, how they come, but they never go away, okay?
The politicians are very shrewd, and they do a lot of things. They know what you know, what you just said, John. They know that you don't have enough time to put on watching what other persons are doing as your representatives, because you got your own life to live. You're raising your family. You got to go out there and make money to pay your bills, put food on the table for your children, and to have a roof over their head and things like that. And there are some needs that have to be met in terms of the parenting needs. So people are very busy, and they know that. So they therefore put these caveats out there like they're doing something really pivotal in people's lives. And then they had this big tax cut, and Republicans out there celebrating and things of that sort. It was a misdirectional thing. They don't reduce any taxes in this country. What you had there was not and they don't even use the word tax reduction. They talked about they used some other words here, but what it was a transference of the taxes from the present time period, and they put the taxes into the future.
Now, see, I like the idea of a tax cut, but they should have looked at things that they could cut first, and then say we could reduce it this area and spread it, go this way, and then we could do a tax cut. And that, because what they're going to do is, the Democrats going to do is, the deficit is going to get so high, they're going to blame it solely on the Republicans. They're going to sound bites provided by the media. Is this going to get the Democrats elected because they sound like the Republicans? We're all ready to increase the deficit. Yeah. That's what they're going to do. I'll guarantee it. The next election cycle. Guarantee it.
I like the way you think. I like the way you think, John. If there's a tax cut and not a tax transference, then how do you explain that what they just did last year now has added $1.4 trillion? John, how did that happen? $1.4 trillion was added to the national debt. How is that a tax cut if you add it to national debt? It's not a tax cut. It's a transference of the tax from the present into the future, right? In other words, that what they did is they took the tax off of the voters and placed it on the non-voters. Right? Is that what they did?
That's exactly what they did.
That's what they did. These are some shrewd people. So, look, John said earlier, John said that he doesn't keep up and doesn't know everything they're doing and so on and so forth. Okay, John, here's what you do know. You know they're politicians, and you know politicians are parasites, and they're parasites because they don't produce anything. And therefore, what you know just based upon that in terms of their parasitic presence is that it behooves the voters to use their power to turn them out with regularity. And I'm not even in saying that as extreme as Peter Schweiker is in his book called Throw Them All Out. When I see somebody up there in Washington like John McCain, see, I need to call some names out here. We need to call roll. Give me the name of all the members of the House and all the members of the Senate. If you tell me that someone has been in the House 20 years and 30 years and things like that, and then you have people like John Conyers, and it's not just John Conyers, but he was thrown to the wolves, to the voters, so to speak. You know, it's like throwing the Christians to the lions. And not that John Conyers is a Christian. John Conyers is a parasite like the rest of them. And when they threw him out of there, that's a good thing. And when Al Franken, who hasn't stepped down yet, but he's going, and when he gets out of there, that'll be a good thing also. And we need to then understand that's just not even the tip of the iceberg, and get the rest of them out of there. Because they're all up there doing that. These are parasites. Can you understand that? Politicians are parasites. Anyone that does not produce anything, but is on the public dime without production is a parasite. Those on welfare that are non-producers, they're parasites. And you do them a favor by getting them into a situation not where they are on welfare forever and not making any contribution. What you do is that you try to get them in position so that their need to be involved in a parasitic relationship where their productivity is locked up by these government structures, these institutions of government. They want to keep them parasitic because that's what they are. As long as they keep them dependent, they can control them. You're not doing anybody a favor by putting people on welfare. You can certainly have there's a transition because people need to have help. And everybody in the community be willing to help them on a temporary basis. But what they want to do is get people and put them on there forever so they can control them forever and lock up their productive capacity, as if all people don't have something to produce. And it's been a destructive influence, particularly in the black community. The people now, women married now to the government. How does that serve anybody? These people have made parasites out of almost out of one half of the population of the country. And that's why America is in fact heading towards, see, we talk about America's republic. But if you continue down this path is going down, then there's one word needs to be put in front of it, and that word is banana. Banana republic. Because that's where these politicians with their crooked selves are taking this country. They're parasites. And so that's all you need to know. And therefore, with regularity, they've got to be turned out.
Well, they always show that the Republicans who are wealthy are usually from business people, and look, they made backdoor deals and stuff. And there's probably some truth to that. I mean, I'm not going to, each individual person's got to be judged by their own merit. But if you look at the Democrats who are multimillionaires, typically they got it through being in alleged public service. So, I mean, there's a vast difference about how the money's accumulated. So, I mean, a person who, like Donald Trump, had to be connected. And he did get benefits from tax breaks and stuff like that. So, he did. So, I mean, he did get supplemented.
No question about it.
So, I'm going to be the first one to say that. But if you look at people like Pelosi and Boxer or whoever, all they've ever done was been on the teat of the American taxpayer. Or the connections that they provide because of that, they really, really benefited from. So that's a big cruise. That's where the crux of it is. That corruption is in the Democratic Party. They're always going to be dependent upon the taxpayers' teat. They really are.
Yeah, and the way Peter Schweiker in the book called "Throw Them All Out," one of the major ways that they become rich. I'm talking about multi-millionaires. They're not just willing to go in there poor, making $175,000 a year, and then with their perks, it comes up to about $285,000 a year when you give them the health care, because they don't get our health care. They get government care on a higher level because of their, as I said, their parasitic presence. These are parasites. And when you add all the perks in, the whole federal structure, they're making at least 1.5 to 2.5 times more money than they make in the private sector. So we are calling them public servants. But when have you ever seen servants making more money than the masters are making? These are not public servants. These are people that are in there as our rulers. And all you need to know is who they are behind their mask. I'm pulling their mask off in 2018 a lot more than I did in 2017. Because once we find out who they are behind their mask, then the people will in fact impose term limits. In fact, you don't even have to impose it. You just have to exercise your power to bring that result about in terms of what is already in place. The framers put term limits on them. John, the term limits already put there by the framers. In the Constitution of the United States, in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, the members of the House are limited to 2 years in their term in office. Now, you can keep voting them back in there for 2 more years, but they have a term limit. And on the second year of their election, in January of that year, 2 years after they're elected, 2 years on the 3rd of January, their term expires. Now, in Article 1, Section 3, the senator's terms are limited. And since you elect 1/3 of the senators every 2 years, see, 1/3 of the senators up for re-election every 2 years. So that within 6 years, the entire Senate has come up for re-election in that 6-year period of time. So every 2 years, 32 to 33 senators, well, 33 senators to 34 senators are up for re-election every 2 years.
Okay, here's the 2 Democrats I'm talking about. I don't know the second one, but Pelosi's worth an estimated $26.4 million.
Yeah.
Shelley Pingree, she's from Maine. She's worth at least $31.8 million. And this is a Republican now. This is Vern Buchanan from he's a Republican from Florida, $36.5 million. But see, the bulk of the Democrats have never been in business world, other than the only thing they've done is be public servants. Which, so I mean, where are they getting all this money? I mean, I would love to be a public servant if I can get that paid. Man. Yeah, I really would.
And the way they get their money is what Peter Schweiker pointed out in his book, Throw Them All Out. And he's saying throw them all out for a reason. The way they get their money to a large extent is they do it through inside trading. In other words, they make the laws. And the laws they make it so it benefits a certain part of the business class through mercantilism. They call it crony capitalism, but crony capitalism is a misapplication of terms. There's no such thing as crony capitalism. It's crony socialism. They want to give capitalism a bad name. Capitalism is government hands off.
It's mercantilism. This is what Adam Smith railed against.
Yes,
and he was. And keep in mind, he was a collector of taxes and customs for the king, of England. So he knew full well where this money is coming from. And so I mean, that's what it is. It's basically he railed against it because it give an unfair advantage to people who want to start a business because you had the force of the government behind you. That's what it was.
You won't find in his book. He's a father of capitalism. You won't find in his book any word where you're putting an adjective in front of capitalism. Why are you, in fact, redefining these terms? Like political correctness. What is that? What is that modifier doing in front of the word correctness? You can't be politically correct and then be truthful. Politics is incorrect. Politics is nothing other than people engaging in buffoonery and deceiving and covering up what it is that they're doing.
Well, how can anything be politically correct when everybody's vying for power? So guess what? That all he says, the political process means you're going to have opposing opinions. How can anything be correct? They basically have to come to a compromise. But politically correct, say that categorically is one thing you can say that's going to benefit everybody, or that doesn't. Okay, political correctness doesn't benefit anybody.
When I went to Washington, we used to take students to Washington in a program called Close Up, and the students would go into a certain program where they're now taken over by those that would receive them in Washington, and they would give them a political education over the course of 1 week. And of course, the government was in fact just simply bringing about more indoctrination, since they got the schools under control and then carrying them to Washington for more indoctrination. But it served a good purpose in some ways too. They can see how the government operates and they sit up close by being there. But one of the things one of the presenters would say when they first got there is that when you become voters, vote your first time against the incumbent. And I never forgot that in terms of why he would say that. Because it's incumbents that are, in fact, becoming very comfortable in their positions, and they don't feel after a certain period of time beholden to the voters because the voters have been trained into incumbency. That's why I say a lot of times that we have two parties in terms of name, but really just have one party in terms of how the system operates, and that's the incumbent party.
Well, look at here. I'm 54. I grew up hearing the name Regal, Don Regal. You know, he was a senator from Michigan, and he had been a senator before. When I was a kid, wasn't really knowledgeable what was going on. I knew the name because he actually lived straight over from where the studio's at now. Okay, he grew up right on that same street across the way there. And then also the Kildees. And guess what? We still have a Kildee in power. I mean, and I'm 54 years old, and he's got another Kildee. Yeah. He's not much different than his uncle. You know, he's not much different politically than his uncle. So, which means bankrupt ideas, and so.
So you see now why 2016 was so important, because we're not supposed to have a dynasty in this country. Yet we had the Bushes. Before the assassination of Kennedy, we seemed like we're going to have the Kennedys in there. And we were going to have the Clintons in there in 2016 in terms of just passing this power down within the family. And how many times have we read where many of these presidents have been elected to each other in terms of their endogamous marital arrangements in this country? So in a very indirect way.
FDR was related through family connections to no less than 7 past presidents.
Yeah, and Franklin Roosevelt was the 5th cousin of Theodore Roosevelt. You know, Theodore Roosevelt, who was the 26th president of the United States, and Roosevelt, who was the 33rd president. The other Roosevelt was the 33rd president of the United States. And look at these relationships. Look at Benjamin Harrison, and then look at Benjamin Harrison in 1888, and then look at William Harrison in 1840, and you see these relationships where we have an aristocratic. It's quietly kept now, but we have a aristocratic class in this country.
The Kennedys still are in power at different various offices across the Eastern Seaboard.
They own Boston.
Yeah, I mean, across the Eastern Seaboard and up and down that place. I mean, they're still in power.
You have a very quiet cesspool nest festering in the background in this country. And I want to say this also about those that go out here and they're talking all this yin and yang about the deep state, and they want to divorce that from the elected state. And they want to say the deep state is in fact above them, and they are controlling what they're doing, and blah blah, and all this noise that they're making out here, as if the deep state is not the visible state that's been placed in the back of them, because they don't want to have the responsibility for their actions. So they create this background noise that is behind the people you vote for. And therefore, you cannot get to them because the decision maker is in the background, and all these things they set up that's in the background, but it's set up because they allow it to be in existence. So what is a deep state? The deep state is that state of affairs that goes on behind the back of the voters, through which there is no electoral influence on what they're doing in the background. And I was arguing with somebody just the other day about the shadow government. I mean, look at your own shadow. What is a shadow? A shadow is a reflection of something that is in fact visible. And if there was no government, could there be a shadow government? And if there's a shadow government, what's the shadow of? It's a shadow of the government. It's a government. It's a shadow of the government itself. That's what exists there. And they created that because they don't want to be held accountable to the American people. So whether you know what your representatives are doing or not, you know this: they're not doing your bidding. And if they were doing your bidding, then they would not be taking a tax off of you and putting it on your children and your grandchildren. That doesn't serve your family. It just postpones the family member that's paying for it. I don't want to be paying all my check to the government and the bureaucrats And I don't want my children paying for it either. So you've not done me a favor. I'm not up there applauding what you did, as you did a tax transference. You didn't reduce anything, and the way I know you didn't reduce anything is because you didn't cut anything. You still got, by one estimate, 2.15 million workers in the federal government. We don't need that kind of bureaucracy in Washington. That kind of bureaucracy pretends corruption. You can't, even if you had honest people running it, which you don't. But if you had honest people running it, it's so humongous, you don't know how all of the pieces are fitting together. You can't monitor that. With all that money going to all these different areas there are people in there with their hands out in different corridors of power. You can't keep up with that. That's the monstrosity that you created. And when you talk about drain the swamp, you can't drain the swamp. The swamp is too big to be drained. And if they're not talking about, how many people talk drain the swamp? Are they talking about reducing the size of government? I don't hear anybody talking about that. And if they're not talking about that, you can't drain it. Because the swamp is the size of government. That's where the swamp is located. And they're trying to act like they are in some kind of reform. You throw John Conyers out, you throw Al Franken out, and some of them retired, like Corker and Flake, glad they're going, and John McCain will be going. Now, I don't wish him any ill health, but John McCain needs to go. This man is in our way, in the way of the country. And so are the rest of them. And when you talk about you don't know what they're doing, okay, fine. We don't know all of what they're doing. They don't let us know all of what they're doing either. But what we do know, based on what we do see them doing, is we know this: none of them are representing the American people. You're not represented in Washington. They are in there to serve their own interests. And some of them are doing it more so than others. You know, some of them, when I was in Africa, you know, it's like this book written by, what's that book written by the writer called Out of America. And of course, they don't like him. He went over to Africa, a black person went over to Africa from the Washington Post. And he was over there in Rwanda during the time that they had all that blood flowing in Rwanda, where they had this genocide, where they were killing 8,000 people a day for 100 days, and 800,000 persons died in a Holocaust over there. That we had never seen that kind of death in that period of time using low tech. These guys had machetes and created that kind of death. And so he's over there seeing all that death. He said that he was out of America. Now they didn't want to hear that, but in his book, he talked about how it works in Africa and how it works in other parts of the world. He made this analogy of two persons that went to school together. One was Chinese, one was from Africa. And so when they came into power in their respective countries, he had the person from Africa to go visit the person in China. And when he got there, he saw this person in this high-rise building. It was unbelievable what this guy had accumulated as far as wealth is concerned. So he said, "Comrade, how did you become so wealthy?" And the person from China said, "Come here. Come to the window." He said, "Look out there." He said, "You see that highway out there?" And the person said, "Yeah, I see it." He patted the Chinese patted himself on the chest. He said, 10%. Okay, that's how he got his money. So when the African person got back to his country, he decided that he's going to return the favor and invite the Chinese into his country. And he said, the Chinese said to the person from Africa, he said, "Comrade, how are you so wealthy?" And the guy said, "Come to the window." He said, "You see that highway out there?" And the Chinese said, "No, I don't see a highway. All I see is all I see are weeds." And the African hit himself in the chest and patted himself in the chest and said, 100%. And that's the way it is. And that's the truth of the matter. Now, a lot of people are going to get mad because they want to blame colonialism, they want to blame racism, they want to blame all these things here. We love to do that because now that points a finger at us. But I ain't buying it, I ain't buying it, I ain't buying it. And Facebook, you banned me from Facebook, but I'm unbent, unbowed, and unbossed. Nobody controls me. And that's something you got that you will learn. You'll learn it now or you learn it later. But you will learn it. I'm not on Facebook right now because I was writing a post on Facebook and they had to get me off there because they couldn't answer anything I was writing about. And because nobody controls me and will not control me. None of the persons in Flint gonna do it. And you get your nose turned up and all of that if you want to. But the name is George Moss. I'm in your face. And in terms of Washington, in 2018, we got an election coming up in November. And what I want to see in that time period is people understanding we have term limits and we've got to begin to impose it. Okay, got to get out of here. Have a happy new year and a great new year. And we will see you next week at the same time. Don't forget to follow your dream. Because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.